want to know what is going on inside the White House, and that book paints a very vivid picture, the clear picture.
Yeah, I was just going to ask
how
Maggie,
it works.
Why do you think it's people have had so much interest in this book? I know you write it, and it's not your job to figure such things out, but you've had to have a pretty intense reaction to it.
Yeah,
why do you think it's connected the way it has?
Yeah, first of all, thanks you guys for talking about the book that way, in the Bible context, no less. But in all seriousness, I do think that because this White House is run by such a small group of people, and because it is so insular, and because they are less leaky than first term, they really are. And it is very hard to get inside these rooms. And so I think that people have a hunger for understanding how decisions are being made in this White House. And I think that's why it's resonated. I mean, I do think that, look, some of these incidents are very familiar to the public, but we were able to go deeper and explain how decisions are made. So I do think that's why. And we're overwhelmed by the response.
Maggie, how were you surprised, because it is such an insular White House, were you surprised by the cooperation you got from many acting members of the Trump administration?
Well, without getting into sourcing, I think one of the advantages that Jonathan Swan and I bring to this coverage, it's also one John Lemire has and a number of other reporters have, is we've been covering him for a very long time. And that gives us a pretty broad sourcing network, inside his world, people around his world, from before he was in the government, this government now, the first term, his campaigns. And we have a pretty good sense of how to determine how people's different accounts overlap. And so I do think, look, the book is fair. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to love what is in it, but I do think that Jonathan and I, made every attempt to try to fact check everything and be very upfront about what we were reporting on. And I think people cooperate, and you both know this, for different reasons. Sometimes people speak to reporters because it's like therapy. Sometimes people speak to reporters because, they actually have something to say. Sometimes it takes a really long time to get people to talk to you as a reporter, and all of those things happen.
And sometimes people inside White Houses speak to reporters to defend what they did. I mean, there are a lot of Bob Woodward books where you could, I think Colin Powell should have gotten actually some, writing credit for some, like The Commanders and some other books. Maggie, one of the people that I talk to regularly inside the White House, and there's not a lot other than I do talk to the president from time to time. I also talk to Jared Kushner from time to time. And the thing I found with Jared Kushner is he is, even though he's not officially in the White House, he just goes out and talks to people. Even about this story, he joked with me. He said, last week I talked to Hamas, and this week people are far more outraged that I talked to Hakeem Jeffries. But he is one of those people that has gone around and talked a lot. Tell me about this particular meeting, though, with Hakeem Jeffries, and what was the genesis of it, and does anybody expect any results from it?
Yeah, so, Joe, there's still a lot, I think, to learn about it. But Annie and I heard about this a few weeks ago, and it took us a little while to have even some sense of what happened. It came about, in our understanding, as some kind of a quote-unquote catch-up. These are two people, as you know, who worked together on criminal justice reform. They developed a relationship in term one, which was unusual at the time, considering that President Trump's White House in term one really did not have an interest in cooperating with Democrats. It's far, more insular this time. There's really nobody in Trump's White House who has a relationship with any of the Democrats. Trump and Chuck Schumer go back a very long way, but that hasn't exactly been a productive relationship. And so this was a broader conversation, notable to us that it was in New York. It was not in Washington. It was at what was described to us as a mutual friend's office. I still don't know who the mutual friend was, but they talked about a bunch of issues, one of which was areas of overlap where things could get done that the White House is interested in and the Democrats are interested in: cost of living, housing, immigration. The chances of that happening, Joe, seem pretty remote to me. But the idea that people talking to each other is something that is going to spark outrage is a sign of where we are. I do think the blowback was pretty expansive for Hakeem Jeffries that I saw, and we'll see if that continues when Congress is back.
You talk to everybody. I mean, that's your job at least. Talk to people, figure out. My opinion here. You get out. If you're Hakeem Jeffries, you talk. Is there a deal on immigration, for instance, that could lessen suffering over the next 2 years? It's what your job is as a leader. But Jared Kushner, Mika, is in a unique position because there aren't contacts really between the White House and Capitol Hill. There aren't that many. But because of criminal justice reform, Hakeem Jeffries, Cory Booker, others on the Hill do have a relationship with Jared working through that process in term one.